LA is back on high alert as the Santa Ana winds ramp up, fanning already uncontained blazes amid fears of new ones as well. It all comes as at least 13 people have died, including one Australian.
We lost everything. I'm so sad that we lost everything.
Life as we know it is over. I feel like I'm looking at my own funeral.
We actually came to say thank you to our house for being good to us. And we were good to it.
As residents come to terms with unimaginable loss, the fight against the inferno remains at fever pitch.
A water drop on this particular home.
And tonight, predictions that conditions are set once again to become life-threatening.
Looking forward over the next few days and into the next week, we will be facing another critical weather event.
The four fires, dubbed Palisades, Eaton, Kenneth and Hurst, have in total ripped through an area almost the size of Newcastle. More than 10,000 structures destroyed, close to 180,000 evacuated, amid fears worsening winds could spark new blazes. LA's mayor and fire chief are united front after mass criticism over the way the crisis has been handled.
We are both focused on our urgent needs to mitigate these devastating wildfires.
The chief and I are lockstep in our number one mission. And that mission is to get us past this emergency right now.
And as the fire fronts worsen, the grim search for bodies goes on. Tragically, one of the dead was Australian former child star Rory Callum Sykes, who was blind and suffered from cerebral palsy.
He said, "Mom, leave me." And no, Mom can leave the kid. And I've got a broken arm. I couldn't lift him. I couldn't move him. When the fire department brought me back, his cottage was burnt to the ground.
So as help pours in from around the country and the world, just how long can LA hold on?
There's that, and then there's a quick one from Gina Yashere. For those of you who saw that, Gina Yashere,
my nose is running. I've been crying. Well, I kept saying I wanted to declutter. And the universe was like, oh, you want to declutter? Let me help you out with that. Let me give you the ultimate cleanse, the ultimate decluttering. Well, people, my house is gone. It's gone. It burnt down last night. I was preparing for the worst because I'm on a text group with my beautiful neighbors in Altadena, and we were seeing videos coming in from my neighbors' cameras showing the fire encroaching. So, yeah, me and about, I'm going to say 7 or 8 of our neighbors lost our houses last night. So I lost pretty much, me and Nina lost everything we owned except for what is in our suitcases that we brought to Canada for Star Trek. And yeah, we lost all those memories. You know, it's been a sad time, but also I feel blessed at the end of the day. I do feel blessed. I have somewhere else to stay. I've got this beautiful property in Costa Rica that we literally just furnished yesterday. It's like the fucking universe was like, you know what? You're going to stay where you are for a bit. I really feel like, I kept saying to Nina, I want to go back to LA for a couple of weeks. I want to go back to our home. I miss our home. I want to go back for a couple of weeks. And Nina kept saying, I don't think it's safe to be back in America right now. And I was like, but let's just go to our house. Our neighbors are wonderful. Let's just go back and just... And she kept saying, it's not safe. And it's not safe to be in America. And then we saw news of Meta fucking deciding to take away protection against hate speech on their platforms. And America basically descending into a fascist state. And I thought, well, maybe she's right. And then our house burned down. It feels like the universe is sending us a message like, bitch, stay the fuck where you are. You don't need to be in America right now. I really feel that. I feel sad. We've lost our beautiful home and all the memories created there. And my memorabilia, it's not even about the house. It's, you know, I had all my flyers and posters from my very first shows back in 95 to present day. All my Bob Hart's Abishola memory. It's all that stuff that I'm upset about. Not so much the house. the insurance will pay out eventually, or maybe not, because they're going to try and stop. The insurance companies, they're all fucking criminals. They're going to try not to pay out. But eventually we'll rebuild that house, but it's all the other stuff that can't be replaced. But we're safe, people. Me, the ninja, the pups, we're safe. We feel blessed. We're safe. We can...
There's more into it. First thoughts, first responses to all of that. Oh, let me stop the screen, sorry. Sorry. That was really hard to watch, I hadn't got through the whole of Gina talking, because as soon as it started, I think I may have watched a minute and I was like, oh, this is just too sad, and I kind of kept on scrolling. Yeah, it is devastating. Definitely. I can't even imagine. Like, the scenes are so apocalyptic. Yeah. But this has been going on to other people around the world. And I hope now, the way people are really being sympathetic to folks in LA, they extend to other people around the world being displaced in their millions and going through exactly the same emotions. There is no difference when you lose your house, or you, at least even these guys have a semblance of a society that will rebuild with them as well. There are other people that are displaced, and they have been for years. So I always come back to that. All of the reports I go back to, but folks have been living like this, and they're in camps. So,
You literally took the words out of my mouth. Like, I feel it for the everyday man in LA who can't afford to rebuild. I feel it for the homeless, the thousands of homeless people that are on the ground and they're being ignored because the focus is elsewhere. I feel it for them. It is apocalyptic. But it's like you said, we've been seeing these scenes, not in LA. We've been seeing these scenes. So I would like to hope that people can actually have some empathy to other people who are experiencing this type of loss throughout the world and are living in terrible, terrible, inhumane conditions. I'd also like to hope that all the politicians that chat shit can realize that the Mexicans that you so want to get out of the country and to stop having access to your borders, they've come in their hundreds to help you put out these fires. The Mexicans who, just the other day, Donald Trump was saying, let's change the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. He wants to change the name or something. Those same people are coming here and helping you putting out these fires. The prisoners, I know we're going to go on to talk about it, but the prisoners that are helping to put out these fires as well, like all these people who you don't give a shit about day to day, they're helping you because they have empathy. And that's how the world should operate a bit more. It is totally devastating. I feel sorry for people like Gina who've lost everything, but it is, every time I see these scenes, I'm like, this is happening in other places as well, and people don't want to talk about it.
I feel like it's really difficult. It's difficult because I think there's definitely, when I saw a post, someone saying that when someone says, they've lost something in the LA fires, look to counter with, it's just stuff, or think about what's going on in the world. I think yes, that's a fact, but also in the immediacy, I think the citizens of LA, it's the politicians, and that language should be directed to the politicians, and I'm not saying anyone's saying that. I'm just saying what I'm feeling from these conversations I'm seeing online, especially, is that, well, it's going on in Gaza, it's going on in Congo, it's going on around the world. Yes, for sure. But for every person that's literally lost everything, it's really hard to comprehend. And sometimes people do need to feel before they feel it themselves. It needs to be on their doorstep for them to even understand what's going on in the world. Because sometimes it's so hard to fathom. Because even though we're bombarded with the horrible scenes from Gaza, for me, it's still like, it's so horrible, but it's still over there. And there's something about, which is, even when we talk about the news on News and Nonsense, it's like, which news do we pick from? Which devastating situation do we pick from? And there's so much stuff going on in Africa. We could cover every single country in Africa has something going on, and we don't get a chance to cover everything. We've spoken a lot about Gaza. So it's like, how do you show empathy and talk about something that's gone on in your immediacy and make sure that you're covering everything else and being fair to everything else? I think it's so hard to compartmentalize, or it's so hard to speak about everything in an equal balance until it happens to you on your doorstep in some way,
I get that, and I'm not even suggesting that you're not saying, that you can't have empathy for both. But when you've got people like Jamie Lee Curtis going on television and saying, "Oh, we haven't seen scenes like this, and it's worse than Gaza," or it's like a war-torn place in Gaza. It ain't, hun, because you can go somewhere and you can live somewhere, and you whilst these people have lost their houses, and again, my heart goes out to them. But whilst these people have lost their houses, they're not being bombarded.
No,
yeah,
exactly.
they're not being. Snipers are not shooting them. Phosphorus gases are not falling down on them. Their children are not freezing in the streets. Yeah, so
I think it's that thing.
I do feel some empathy for them, but then you've got people like James Woods who said kill them all, openly on Twitter. And then he's crying on CNN, and I'm meant to feel sorry for him because he's lost his house
individually. Yes, of course.
That I don't give a fuck about. Realistically, I don't give a fuck about. I saw an elderly black man, and he helps his community. This is in LA. He helps his community. He's been helping his community for decades. He's built his house up by himself, and he's lost it. I feel sorry for him.
From Altadena, the guy, because that black community in Altadena has a lot of historical black legacy. All that, a lot of I think it's 30% of that's gone. And that's a lot of Black American history that's lost to the fires, for sure.
Just to come back on your point, though, because I understand when people say this, but I feel like it's missing the context of why, when there is, let's call it Western grief, white grief, and you have people immediately empathize and understand and feel it. That's why in that moment, when they're in that crux of the emotion of it, you have to say, think about the people in Gaza that have been going through this and worse, 100 times worse, for over a year. That same emotion that you have a white woman there sifting through the soot, or the black woman sifting through the soot, crying, and we all are like, oh my God, if I lost the pictures of my mum, if I lost my baby pictures, like you're immediately able to go there. Do you not think that Palestinians, when they were being torn out of their houses, had to leave their pictures? They had to leave all of their clothes. They had to leave all of their family heirlooms. It's exactly the same thing. So that's why in that moment when people are feeling it, you have to bring it back home to when you were scrolling past or were like, well, Israel have the right to defend themselves. They are humans. The same as Jamie Lee Curtis, the same, exactly the same outlooks. Like it's, and it's just bringing it back to that. And it isn't. I don't have sympathy for the Americans. I actually want them to be like, shit. Look at what we've just gone through, and we could go to a hotel. They ain't got that. No, this isn't right. I can't be idly by while my government is funding this happening to another human being.
Government who just sent $8 billion to Israel for weapons, whilst let's see how long it's going to take LA to recover from these fires. And there are going to be people who don't benefit from insurance or handouts or anything like that. Many people don't benefit from them. I'll take it back to the homeless people again that are on the streets of LA. Like, what about those guys? You know, they're being given peanuts, or they're being told they can go to a hotel for a day and stuff like that. Like, what good is that? If it, you know, they have nothing to begin with, and then they've lost everything. And then LA can't even cope with what's going on because the way that the government funds shit. You can find 8 billion for weapons, but you can't find 8 billion that 8 billion could have solved their homeless problem. It could have. Yeah, 100%. Could have gone into restructuring LA and could have gone into paying more firefighters. So then you don't have people coming from South Africa to help you.
No, I think that's that. I'm glad that's the other counterpoint, and it is also about the fashionable war stories or the fashionable devastation stories. LA fires, the war in Gaza, Congo tries to get in there, but African stories don't get the same light coverage as Gaza did, unless it's like the famine side of things, and that hasn't really penetrated the news headlines.
It's not penetrating the news. Let's be honest. It's not penetrating the news in the media. It's not on the news. You do not hear about the devastation in Gaza on normal Western media. You don't. We're hearing about it because it's on social media, and I totally agree with you. It's not getting the same amount of. I'm just
saying that there's more people talking about there's more contention and back and forth about the attention on Gaza than there is about lots of things happening in Africa, lots of things happening in other countries. So there is definitely a thing that we're all guilty of also being focused on the popular conversations. Do you get what I'm saying? So I because there's stuff going on in Congo. Stories aren't breaking through in the same way. They're not.
It's because
I know, but I just don't think. I think I don't like the popular part of it.
I mean, it is, but that's the word. It's like
the structure of what's going on in Congo is more complicated and involves different types of businesses. Where with Palestine, you can clearly see the governmental involvement. So it's like the structure of what's taking place and the sheer amount of funding that Israel is getting from our countries. That's what makes it easier to be like, look at what's taking place here. Because also, when you allow that to take place, they're using Palestine as a tool. If we're all silenced or we focus elsewhere, they can do this everywhere. So that's why there's more heat on that taking place, because what's taken in the Congo is harder to pinpoint because there's Congolese governments involved in this as well. So it's slightly different. It's not, but even that we're focused on the Congo, because for 10 years nobody was even talking about it at all.
Very
it's
true.
Still progress that is still in the zeitgeist as well. But what's going on in Palestine, this is also, it's like 70 years that they've been going through this as well. So,
76, nearly 77 years.
But I get it. I get the sentiment, but also it is like this, they too, if you're Palestinian, will be like, thank fuck that this is even getting any luck at all, because it's a long time as well.
And
definitely.
I think it's, we need to figure out a way, and it's down to the media, because the media is so fucked anyway. The media's bought out. You can't trust the media at this point, but there has to be a way that, even if it is difficult to decipher who's at fault in which political agenda, war, desecration, whatever the case, famine, whatever's being instigated in all these other countries, there has to be a way to decipher it and bring the actual facts to the masses. Because it's yes, understandably about Gaza.
I understand what you mean. But I do think Nana's right. Like, I think by highlighting what's going on in Gaza and the fact that it has been going on or Palestine, should I say, not just Gaza, it has been going on for 76 years. And then you look at the people within the Arab community, within the Arab world, that are not speaking up. It's because they have their hands are dirty in other places. So interrogating the systems that we have in place that have led to something like Gaza, and the reason why, Palestine and the oppression that they're suffering, and the reason why they're being funded, it all goes back to that. So I don't think it's a bad thing to highlight what's happening there, because it opens up a massive can of worms, and then it leads to other things. So
I don't think it's a bad thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm saying thank you. Oh, you want to do an announcement?
Thank you, Buddy. Thank you. Well, you've been a part of the family anyway, and we love you.
Thank you.
He is a family. But
I'm not, and also that's just clarify. I'm definitely not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying there has to be, because it is that ease of this is also a bad thing, but then there's other things that don't get the same highlight, because again, we are still wrapped up in the Western agenda of it all. And there's things that get not dealt with in the same way.
I understand.
It's hard to balance it all out and speak about everything that's going on, because that's even impossible, because all the atrocities are happening around the world. We'll never get through the day of news. It'll be news and nonsense will be on freaking 24 hours.
I think it's important to highlight the things that the governments are responsible for.
Yeah.
I was just going to mention as well, like when you're talking about Western disasters and stuff like that, let's not forget the millions that went into them rebuilding. Is it Notre Dame? When that got caught on fire, they were acting like it was a fucking, like a bomb hit it, and like how many people went into their deep pockets and funded that shit and rebuilt it, and it's been rebuilt in how many years? It's not even taken them that long to do that shit.
Exactly. Just to go into some of the conversations around the fires, is like, so Los Angeles mayor, she was on the clip, the first clip, Mayor Karen Bass, she got backlash because she was in Ghana at the inauguration of our new president in Ghana. But I thought that was, again, because I think there was a comment further, we haven't done the comments as much. Someone said further up that there's two leaders of California in that space. That they're women, so the blame's a lot heavier. Even though Gavin Newsom's being blamed as well, and he's a governor of California. She got backlash, even though she went to Ghana before for, it was like an official visit to the inauguration, as I said. But she came back within 24 hours. Like, I'm not Californian, so I don't know her politics, whether she's a good mayor or she's been able to do what she's doing. But a lot of people criticized her for redirecting funds supposed to be for the fire institution to sorting out the homeless and / sorting out the police. I don't know which is which. I've seen two different arguments, but she redirected funds to the homeless, and then another person said that another group is saying that she redirected funds to the police. Whatever the case, but the one that stood out for me is that you're criticizing redirection money to the homeless. And if government institutions have to deal with the budgets that they've got, and I know I might be being a little bit biased because she's a black woman, so I'm trying to have a little bit extra, I maybe have a bit more patience with what she's doing that I maybe wouldn't have if it was a white man. But it is like, if she's had to make cuts and stuff like that, what do they do when their hands are tied and their budgets are tight? And is that to blame for the lack of like water pressure when the fires are trying to be put out by the fire? You know, there's a whole lot of stuff and mix up. I don't know if you guys
the mayor can be solely blamed for anything. Exactly. And I'm appreciating the backlash against Khloe Kardashian for slamming her and people being like, you need to shut your fucking mouth.
Explain
shut your mouth.
Also, the Kardashians have been fined numerous. I'll get to it. Oh, okay, the Kardashians have been fined numerous times for going against using water on their property. They have that, and they have been fined. That's on record. Yeah. But what Khloe was saying about the mayor, people are saying is not actually true. She didn't take away money from the fire rescue departments and place it somewhere else. They negotiated, and she actually then gave them in the culling. Gave them 50 million that was negotiated, that this should be sufficient. Now, her hands are tied with a budget anyway. As anybody who's dealing with budgets, you can only do so much. So she did her thing. Then you have the governor, who actually, I think in this instance, Donald Trump has a point in regards to Gavin Newsom. That when you want to do reforms, and actually you can see the forecast for the year that this may be a severely dry winter for them. And you should be able to release some funds so that they can get these reservoirs actually open so that there's more water within LA. He didn't vote for that. That's one thing. He's the fault. Now, the ones that were selling the resources off to private companies, can we have a moment for them people? Like, exactly. You are also complicit in all of this. It's actually a royal shit show along the way down. Yeah. Everybody is complicit. And the only people that are really, truly suffering are the people who the insurance aren't going to pay for, than the homeless folk. Yeah. The millionaires, you're going to be able to sort your places out. And a lot of you are in hotels. But actually, let's look at how governments are selling off our natural resources, and this is happening around the world. Why does a family own 60% of the water? That's what I was just about to say. How can that be a thing even? And that should be what people are like really railing against, not the black mayor at all. Let me play.
3 million Californians suffer through unprecedented drought. One billionaire couple owns a massive share of the state's water system, seized in a series of secretive meetings 2 decades ago. That system was largely paid for by the very taxpayers whose water these billionaires hold hostage. Urban water systems are desperate for water, but in 2023, they'll receive just 5% of what they requested from the state. The Resnicks are the biggest farmers in California. As of 2007, they owned 4 San Francisco's worth of farmland, and nearly half of Americans buy at least one of their products. Their pistachios, their pomegranate juice, their mandarins, their flowers. It's all under one massive umbrella, the Wonderful Company, a privately owned company worth at least $5 billion. The majority owners, the Resnicks, are worth at least $8 billion. How were they able to take over such a large percentage of what should be a shared public resource? This is The Classroom from More Perfect Union, and today we're looking at how the Resnicks got rich. Linda is a former child actress, the daughter of Jack Harris, a successful movie distributor of the 1950s, most well known for The Blob.
Starring Steve McQueen and a cast of exciting young people.
At 19, she founded her own advertising agency. Stewart was born to a middle-class New Jersey family and started his first business, a janitorial service, in grad school. He eventually acquired American Protection Services, a burglar alarm and security company. Linda approached him about marketing services for the company, and they hit it off, not knowing that one day they'd work together to take over California's water. The lovebirds became business partners. They bought Teleflora, the flower delivery company, and the Franklin Mint, purveyors of inane little tchotchkes. Linda was the marketing person, and Stewart was in charge of business. As Linda told the LA Times in 1993, "I've always said that Stewart and I together make one perfect person, like little salt and pepper shakers." In the late 80s, they found their primary industry, agriculture. They got into the pistachio business. Linda said, "We've done more for the pistachio than anyone ever since it was planted in the Garden of Eden. My husband should be canonized for all the work he's done." Started branching into other products, almonds, pomegranates, citrus, wine, and acquiring more and more land to cover it, including some very important land in Kern County, which granted them water rights in the area. As the Resnicks were building their empire, the state of California was building new water infrastructure with taxpayer money. California's natural water supply is very inconsistent. Vastly differing amounts of rainfall means the state can go from surplus to drought and back very easily. So they build water banks to store water during surpluses to have during droughts. One important storage facility is the Kern Water Bank, started in 1988. The facility was built with hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars, which could have been a good thing. The people of California would have owned the water. But there were two Californians thirstier than the rest, and they wanted more water: Linda and Stewart Resnick, and they had a lot of political power. We'll get to that. In 1994, state water officials, water infrastructure contractors, and agricultural landowners with water rights arranged a secretive meeting at a resort in Monterey Bay, California. These groups, a mix of private companies and public agencies, rewrote California's water rules without any input from voters, taxpayers, or legislators. The new rules, called the Monterey Plus Agreement or the Monterey Amendments, were devastating for working Californians, and great for agriculture billionaires. The original code included urban preference, a long-standing rule that in times of drought, the state water board would give urban areas, where people live, access to water supplies before agricultural interests. Monterey axed that. That means that in times of drought, the water systems for normal Californians would have to buy water from private companies because they weren't getting it from the state. The new agreement also loosened regulations on paper water. That's water that doesn't necessarily exist anywhere but on paper. The full quantities of water that providers could have, but don't actually need to have. Today, 5 times as much water has been promised and sold as actually exists. And importantly, the meeting changed ownership of the Kern Water Bank. What once belonged to the state was transferred to a few private water contractors, one of which was Westside Mutual, a wholly owned subsidiary of Wonderful Foods. The wonderful employee who runs Westside, Bill Phillimore, is the chairman of the public organization that manages the Kern Water Bank. Boom. One secret meeting, and the Resnicks owned nearly 60% of an important California water resource, built with hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayer money. The new ownership, combined with the rules on paper and surplus water, meant that during times of drought, the Resnicks could sell Kern water back to the state water systems. They took Californian taxpayers' water and sold it back to them, both literally as the water supply and also to grow expensive food like gourmet pistachios and pomegranate juice. They converted the people's water into products many can't afford. And that's just one water bank. The Resnicks also have control of other water boards and have been sued for directing more water towards their properties. So how do they get away with this Chinatown-level chicanery?
Going to be a lot of irate citizens when they find out that they're paying for water that they're not going to get.
With philanthropy. The Resnicks donate millions of dollars to politicians and research institutions, which help them secure control over water systems, and even get more water and more taxpayer funding. One important project is the proposed California Delta Tunnel, a taxpayer-funded project which would send water from Northern California to Central, where the Resnicks farms are. They've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on state and federal legislation and politicians who support the tunnel project. But their favorite politician is Senator Dianne Feinstein.
You come in here and you say it has to be my way or the highway.
Chair of the Energy and Water Subcommittee. She's a close personal friend of the Resnicks, attending their holiday parties in Aspen and maintaining their financial interests. A quick look through the bills she's sponsored shows several which would direct money to Kern-adjacent water projects. The Resnicks even ask her for things directly. When a pesky study about endangering salmon and shad fisheries threatened the Delta Tunnel, Stewart wrote a letter to Feinstein demanding a new study. She immediately forwarded it to the Obama administration, who agreed to spend $750,000 on a new study. It returned the same results as the first one. Can't buy science. But the Resnicks have tried. They are among the top donors to the University of California system, with their donations focusing on agricultural and ecological studies. The Resnicks have basically bought entire departments who put out studies on how water systems should be managed, and where funding should go. That leads to even more federal and state taxpayer dollars being used to fix up what the Resnicks profit off of. This is all bad for California, even in a capitalistic sense. Agriculture uses 80% of California's water, but only represents 2% of its GDP. The Resnicks' water monopoly is just one way their quest for wealth hurts the rest of us. They allegedly lobby for increased tensions with Iran to keep embargoes on superior Iranian pistachios. Their giant crops lead to monocultures which kill important pollinators. They siphon taxpayer dollars into the company town charter schools they own, set up to train children to work for their farms. And of course, like any company of this size, they exploit their workers. We need to treat water for what it is: a necessary public resource, a human right, and something that shouldn't be owned by anyone, and work towards legislative change that stops people like the Resnicks from stealing it.
A little class lesson.
I'm just so sick of all these people. I mean, I'm not even fucking surprised. I'm chuckling to myself because I'm not even fucking surprised. Exactly. This is what they all do. This is how the world runs. So when people are talking about right and wrong and all this shit, the politicians that are standing up, you don't give a fuck. As long as your pockets are being lined, you don't actually care. And you don't care about the environment because you feel like I'm going to make my money and I'll be dead anyway. So who gives a fuck? They don't care. They don't care.
Because how can you have a crooked business in water? How can you sell water that's not there, that doesn't exist, and trade on water?
Selling water that ain't there, but the taxpayers are paying for the fund, but they're actually paying for the infrastructure for water that they cannot get.
Exactly. Yes. I mean, it's been out there that 2030 is probably the beginning of the apocalypse, to a sense, in terms of we're going to be fighting for water. That there are going to be like droughts of water in the Western world, and we're going to have to pay over the odds to get it. And in effect, they have set this up so that a few families are going to be profiting from us fighting over water, like they do over oil. Like it's the same thing. Like actually, if you think, why should oil be privately owned? That should be a state resource. It's like they set these things up. Our water system, it should be a government body that is providing us with water. Why are we getting it from private companies?
Why?
Like, all
who
of these
are pumping raw sewage into the fucking rivers
and also
and seas.
People that don't know how to treat water. They don't care about the actual cleanliness, the treatment, how water should be looked after. It's just about money.
They're trying to buy the science behind it.
They have, basically, the Resnicks have, because if you actually are self-funding departments, the government goes to create their legislation, and it's always going to be in your favor. Like you have everything set up for you to win.
It's no different.
How much money do these guys want?
It's no different to Big Pharma. It's no different to Big Pharma.
How can you literally buy school? Literally, you're buying the slaves to come back work for you. You're creating, and then they're going to have the cheek to then call places like China communist states and all that type of stuff. But yet and then when you see those videos of Chinese kids doing it, then they'll be criticizing that. But that is what you're doing.
This is the thing that makes me laugh the most. It's this illusion of democracy and that they're better than everybody else in the world. It's like you're actually not like, and what's funny is like this 2030 thing, I fucking hope that it happens, because like you are doing what you're doing and you don't even care that now we can see you doing what you're doing. Like, people are onto your game, but you don't care because you're still just paying who you want to pay and you're getting away with it. Then you're looking, like you said, at other countries and saying that they're under dictatorship. No, we're under dictatorship.
Is it not fair though for them to treat us with this level of contempt when you have people crying over Kamala Harris not winning an election like it's not the same shit? If you think the masses are stupid, and they act stupid, who's stupid? Like I kind of don't blame them because we know all of these things. I'm not going to go and riot.